The Brahman seer is said to have made the prediction, "Black rain will bring riches to Aberdeen." Some believe that the Brahman seer was invented by a folklorist after the first discovery of oil in 1851, when James Young extracted oil from Torbanite mined in the Central Belt, and that would spark a new era in Scotland's history. But for that to happen, we need to wait over 100 years. Oil. Think of how useful oil was in the Second World War. Japan mainly invaded China for natural resources such as oil. Oil powered tanks, planes, ships. It was critical, and so, for many decades after World War II, countries rushed to find oil near their shores. And for the Norwegians, British, Germans, Danes, and Dutch, this was no problem, as they had easy access to the North Sea. The North Sea covers 220,000 square miles, or roughly 0.111657% of the Earth's surface, and it was full of oil. There were many different oil fields out in the North Sea, but the most important was discovered in 1970, and it was called the Forties Field. In January 1972, the silence on the shores of the Cromarty Firth was shattered by the noise of diggers. They had a formidable task. They had to dig 1.5 million cubic yards of sand and sandstone in just 7 months. The date was met, and by July they had Nigg Fabrication Yard up and running. They had made a graving dock 1,000 feet long by 500 feet wide and 50 feet deep. The location was pretty much perfect except for one thing. There wasn't a local skilled labour force. However, there was an easy solution to that. Unemployment was at an all-time high in the area, so they promised good pay for the young lads available, and by November there were over 600 men and women working at Nigg. The success of Nigg Fabrication Yard, along with the aftermath of the 1973 oil crisis, which caused global prices to quadruple, led to the founding of Arnish in 1974 and Kishorn in 1975. The amount of people from Glasgow who moved up to the local towns meant that a Glaswegian accent can still be heard in many areas of Invergordon and Alness today. There were, of course, concerns wherever these fabrication yards popped up that the local area would be significantly damaged. However, the need for employment was bigger of importance to the locals. In Kishorn, they made the 600,000-ton Ninian Central Platform, the largest man-made object to be moved across the Earth's surface until the 90s, when it was surpassed by a Norwegian oil rig. At the same time as Nigg was being built, Ardersier Port was also being built. All these places played a critical role in getting the oil rigs out there, but there is another side to the story. The discovery of the Forties Field was, and still is, one of the greatest things to happen in Aberdeen. The exploitation of oil had to go out from Aberdeen. This allowed for Aberdeen to become the oil capital of Europe. Money poured into the city, and it allowed it to have an unemployment rate of 2%, or about 4,500 people. The major oil companies employ nearly 18% of all the people employed in Aberdeen. Clearly, the city has a lot to thank the oil industry for, but all good things must come to an end. Aberdeen still makes from oil companies, but Nigg, Ardersier, Kishorn and Arnish all closed in the 90s when demand for rigs was lower. However, in recent years, some of these fabrication yards have been used to produce renewable energy to try and offset the damage to the environment caused during their heyday. So the country's, Scotland's unemployment problem caused after World War II was solved by these oil companies, and so, even though they have damaged the environment, they have helped the nation get back on track. So there are certainly some things we can thank the oil companies for. This is the bit where I talk about stuff I needed to talk about but didn't. The Greenport have come to the Cromarty Firth and have included Ardersier. The Forties Field should be closing down in 2026. Labour says no more new oil fields. And the Pensacola oil field could hold up to 342 million barrels of oil. That's the problem with doing a long project. The Brahan Seer is said to have made the prediction, black rain will bring... The Brahan Seer is said to have made the prediction, black rain will bring riches to Aberdeen. Some believe that the Brahan Seer was invented by a folklorist, after the first discovery. In January... At the same time as Nick was being built, Ardor Seer Port was also being built. All these places were key in getting the oil rigs out there, but of course there is always another side to the story.